Have you ever looked back at your relationships in the past and thought, how did I end up here again? Maybe the faces were different, maybe the names were different, maybe the circumstances were even different. But somehow the arguments felt really familiar to you. The loneliness felt really familiar. The anxiety felt really familiar to you. Maybe you found yourself becoming the caretaker again, or maybe the peacemaker, or the one that constantly trying to prove your worth to your partner. And you start wondering, why do I keep attracting the same kind of person? Here's the question I want us to explore today. What if it isn't about attracting the same people? What if it's about recognizing the same emotional pattern in these people? Because I don't think we choose our partners. I think we often choose dynamics that our nervous system already understands and is quite used to. And sometimes those aren't the dynamics that help us heal. Sometimes they keep us stuck. But don't worry, we're going to unpack this together.
Welcome to Mindful Chatting, a podcast where therapy meets real life. I'm Kristen, a therapist, business owner, and a lifelong student of what it means to fully show up in our relationships, in our work, and in our healing. Here, we unpack mental health concepts, explore mindfulness tools, and talk through the messy, beautiful, in-between moments that shape us. Whether you're a fellow clinician, a curious listener, or someone navigating your own growth, this space is for you. Let's chat.
Welcome, my friends. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about relationships is that healthy love always feels instantly comfortable. Sometimes it doesn't, though. Sometimes healthy love feels really unfamiliar to us, especially if you grew up having to earn your affection from the people that were around you, like your caregivers or your role models. Unconditional care might actually feel really suspicious to you. If you grew up walking on eggshells in your house, or calmness might actually feel really boring for you. If you grew up being the emotional caretaker to your caretakers, receiving support can feel really uncomfortable for you. Our nervous system often mistakes familiarity for safety, but those aren't always the same thing. Your nervous system doesn't automatically choose what's healthy for you. It often chooses what it already knows, which keeps us in those familiar patterns with those familiar people. I want you to think about the roles many children adopt growing up in their lives. And I want you to think about yours specifically. Maybe you became the responsible one, the peacemaker, the achiever, the invisible one, or maybe the emotional support child. Those roles often don't disappear when we become adults. They simply just show up, and they show up in our romantic relationships. Without realizing it, we may start looking for someone who allows us to keep playing those same familiar roles because we know what they look like. We know what's expected of us. There's kind of this predictability in the chaos. And it's not because it's healthy, only it's because it's familiar to us. I want to share a personal story where I don't really have to think about why these particular people popped up in my life. Because after a while, I started to see them. I started to see my caretakers, my past relationships with people, and I started to see them in the people that I started to date. And I started to recognize my own tendencies where I was wanting to fix them. I was going into these overcompensating territories and dynamics that I was all too familiar with. I began overfunctioning and explaining, and instead of expressing myself, I tended to mute myself and my opinions and my feelings because those people and those dynamics became the center of that universe. And I started taking responsibility for everyone's emotional state. And as you can probably see as I describe this, how exhausting and draining and defeating all of that is. And if you've ever been in those positions too, I bet you know what those feelings are. And I bet you know how debilitating it can be in a relationship like that. It can feel very isolating. It can feel like nobody understands you, yet you are just overtaking and overcompensating in these relationships. And when I started to become aware that I kept attracting the same type of person, I realized when I started to date again that I actually needed to look for someone that was kind of boring, that kind of gave me predictability, that kind of gave me that safety instead of looking for intensity. Because at the end of the day, I was kind of mimicking intimacy for intensity, when really intimacy was about being routine, about being predictable. And that meant I was going to have to get uncomfortable. I was going to have to get uncomfortable with something that was uncharted for me and unfamiliar. And that's when I found out what real unconditional love and support felt like without having to beg or persuade someone to give it to you.
If you want to understand your ADHD in a deeper way, I've created the ADHD Crash Course, and it walks you through ADHD step by step so that you can actually start understanding your brain and not shaming it. Everything's in small, doable lessons designed for your ADHD in mind. The link is in the show notes.
Now, I want to be clear as we move into the subject that most people aren't consciously looking for their caretaker or their parent. They're looking for something they missed within that relationship. Maybe they're longing for acceptance or consistency, emotional safety, encouragement, or maybe even protection. Sometimes it could be just to be chosen or to be prioritized within your relationships. Those are deep human needs. The problem isn't having those needs, even though maybe some of those dynamics in past relationships have made you feel that way. The problem is expecting a romantic partner to heal wounds that they didn't necessarily create for you. And that puts enormous pressure not only on that partner, but that relationship to heal something that's so very deep. So, this is where I want you to pause and I want to talk about the attachment mirror as we go through these things. And I always kind of ask these 5 questions when I'm working with clients about their attachment when they start new relationships with people. So I want you to ask these questions for you to see if maybe you're in a current relationship that maybe you need to reevaluate, or maybe you are thinking about dating again, or you keep finding yourself being attracted to these same particular people. So the first question is, what feels familiar about this relationship? And what's interesting about this question is you can date someone for the first time, first date, and there's just something about it that just feels familiar. Not exciting, familiar. And I think this is what creates a lot of confusion for people, because when our nervous system feels familiar, sometimes we'll think of that as safety, as comfortability, when really it's just something that is familiar. And at the end of the day, our nervous system and our brain is always looking for pattern recognition. So if it finds something very familiar, it's going to go, oh, I've seen this before. Now, it depends if this familiar thing was also scary, traumatic, or safe. Our nervous system is very black and white. All it is going to detect familiarity. So I just want you to step back and go, what feels the same in this relationship, or maybe this date, or this with this particular person that maybe I've seen or felt before. And you don't necessarily have to indulge or interpret it. It's just recognizing what it is. The next question I want you to ask yourself is, what role do I automatically step into? So I want you to think about your past relationships, and I want you to think about the role that you've maybe stepped into quite often. It doesn't have to be every single relationship you've been in, but I think as we say this, we tend to have these particular, things that we tend to fall in kind of automatically. That could be your caretaker role, your fixer, your people pleaser, your avoider, your performer. All of these roles we tend to fall into, and we fall into them without necessarily realizing that we're falling into them, which is kind of scary. But I want to recognize what that role is that I tend to lean or default to, because that actually might be what's familiar in the first question, is that I'm falling into the familiarity of the role that I'm used to. Or this person that I'm starting to date falls into the dynamic of the role that causes me to maybe step into my fixer caretaker role. So as we go into these questions, we're going to be kind of switching back and forth from maybe a current relationship that you're in, past ones, or if you're starting to date new people. Question number 3. What emotional need am I hoping that this person will finally meet? And this question could actually just be changing from not this person, but what am I hoping this relationship will finally meet for me? Am I hoping that this relationship or this person will make me feel chosen or made me feel wanted, made me feel desired, prioritized? Maybe they're going to make me feel like I'm enough or safe or finally seen. I want you to recognize what I'm looking for before I ever step in a relationship with somebody. I'm already kind of defining and putting expectations not only on myself and this new person, but on the relationship fulfilling something that I think they should be fulfilling within me or healing me.
Okay, quick pause. Because you've ever found yourself rewinding this episode like 3 times because your brain just drifted, this is for you. I hear this all the time. I can focus, just not when I actually need to. And that's exactly what the focus course is about. Because here's the truth. ADHD isn't a lack of attention, it's a regulation issue, which is why some days you're locked in for hours and other days you're rereading the same sentence, wondering what just happened. So inside my executive functioning focus course, I break this down in a way that actually makes sense for you. We go through how your attention works in your brain, your specific focus patterns, why you get distracted externally and internally, and how to actually build a system that helps you stay on track and come back when you drift. Because the goal isn't perfect focus, it's knowing how to return without spiraling. So if you're tired of blaming yourself and you just want something that actually works with your brain, I'll link the focus course in the show notes. All right, let's get back to this episode.
Question number 4, is this relationship helping me grow or helping me repeat? Those are two different things. And like I said, if you just started dating this new person, I want you to think about, where is this person at? Is it in a state that's helping me grow, or is it helping me go back into something that I'm used to and familiar with? Sometimes repetition can feel like love because it's familiar. But repetition isn't always about healing. So we mistake of, am I trying to heal and grow in this relationship, or am I just looking for something that makes me feel loved, which might not always necessarily be that healthy love that I'm looking for. And question number 5 is, what would a healthier version of this dynamic really look like for me? So this question might be going back to your past relationships, and it kind of shifts you from awareness into action. So for an example, a healthier version of a dynamic where I'm caretaking is where I'm having a partner who takes accountability and responsibility for their emotional state and not putting it on me to try to make them feel better. That would require a space where they hear both sides, be very empathetic, be able to perspective take, and also manage their emotions. That is a dynamic that I should be looking for. But if I've never been in that dynamic before, it's going to be unfamiliar to me. It might make me a little uncomfortable. It might even make me uneasy or maybe want to step away or avoid. I just want you to notice and look at, what is the dynamic that I'm looking for? So when you see it, you can go, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like. And then understand that that might have very conflicting feelings for you as you start to go through that healthier dynamic. One of the most surprising parts of healing is that your definition of chemistry might actually change. The person who once felt really exciting or intense may now feel emotionally unavailable to you. The relationship that felt really intense or you thought was actually intimate might actually feel very exhausting. And the person who once seemed kind of boring to you may actually now feel emotionally safe and comfortable. Healing doesn't just change your relationships, it changes what your nervous system recognizes as home for you, which is ultimately what we're trying to do.
If you're listening to this and thinking, this is exactly what I struggle with, I want you to know that I built something specifically for you. The EF, or Executive Functioning Activation course, walks you through why task initiation feels so hard with your ADHD and how to actually get yourself moving without shame, pressure, or burnout. It's short, practical, and designed for ADHD brains, not productivity culture. If starting is your biggest barrier, this course gives you structure, language, and tools that actually work for you. You'll find the link in the show notes.
This week, I want you to journal about one of your relationships, whether it be past or your present one, and I want you to ask yourself, what felt familiar to you? What role did I play? What emotional need was I hoping will finally be met? And what would I do differently today? I don't want you to judge yourself. I just want you to start getting curious as you work through these questions, as you think about your past and your current relationships. If there's one thing that I hope you remember from today's conversation, it's this. You are not doomed to repeat the relationships you've experienced in your past. Awareness gives you the choice to do something different. Healing gives you the idea that you have more possibilities. And healthy love isn't about finding someone who completes what's missing for you. It's about becoming someone who can recognize the difference between familiarity and safety. Because the goal isn't to find someone who feels like home because they remind you of your past. It's to build a relationship that feels like home because it's grounded in trust, respect, and mutual care. I want to thank you for joining me. And as always, be gentle with your mind.
One more thing before you go, and this helps me personally, staying present and grounded, which we all need, especially when your brain wants to spiral into disconnection. Me too. It's Brain FM. It's musically designed to help ADHD brains, well, really anyone's brain, focus, relax, or sleep, and I use it almost daily. If you want to try it, I've dropped my link in the show notes. And if you're looking for planning tools or ADHD-friendly resources, I'll keep a list of my favorite links in every episode.